And we are live. Very exciting. Welcome back to everyone, or if you're new here, welcome. And most importantly, welcome back to Carmel Harrington, back on the channel again.
I'm delighted to be here. It's just gorgeous to be back chatting to you again. And hello to everyone out there if you're watching, and thanks for tuning in.
Fabulous. It's so nice to have you back. I know I'm in a different country than last time I spoke to you,
Yeah.
and the country is in a completely different state from last time we spoke as well. So it's quite nice to be back with sort of more positive vibes going on.
Yeah, it is actually, like, it's really changed. Like, I mean, as you said, when we spoke last year, I mean, everything was on Zoom like this. This was the normal, really. And what's been really nice with this book is that I've been able to get back out with readers again, and I've been able to just kind of connect with people again in a more organic way, and it's just been really, really, really lovely. I've enjoyed it. And even the retailers, like the bookshops too, to go to a bookshop and speak to someone and see your book on a bookshelf, and it's just a different experience. So I've really enjoyed it. It's been great.
Yeah, I'm really pleased. It's been so much more positive. I saw on your Instagram that you managed to have a proper book launch day as well. We're going to talk a little bit about publication day in a little bit. So yeah, I was excited to see that. I was like, oh, we can talk about that. That's very exciting.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about your new book today, A Mother's Heart. If you want to sort of show us the book and give us the both versions.
Yeah, both versions, and they're very different, but they're both. Hang on, I get them. So this is the American Canadian one, and it's a very vibrant blue. She promised she'd always keep their family together. So a really good tagline, actually. That's a really nice edition. And then the Irish and the UK edition has gone for it's kind of a sagey green, a sea green color.
Yeah.
How far would you go to protect your family? Kind of similar enough taglines, really. But that's the two versions side by side. And I believe the New Zealand Australian version is this one as well. They're going to go with the same cover, I think, as far as I know, in October.
Fancy. I think the tagline gives us the two taglines together give us a really good idea, a really good feel for what the book is about. But do you want to give us the elevator pitch of what we can expect from this book?
Yeah, well, really, the story centers around Rachel, who is a young stepmother from New Zealand, who finds herself as the sole parent of her stepchildren, Olivia and Dylan, who are 8 and 5. And she's been their only parent for 2 years when the story starts. She married a widower, and he dies tragically, leaving her as the sole parent. And things get quite complicated because as she's from New Zealand, she visits her family in New Zealand, kind of post-lockdown, post-COVID, with the children. And when she's home again with her family, with her mum and her dad and with her sister, she begins to think about her life in New Zealand and begins to feel that pull to go home, and questions whether or not herself and the kids will be better off moving back to New Zealand. And just asking that question, it just sets in place such a far-reaching consequences, because the children's Irish grandparents, both her husband's parents and their mothers, their birth mother's parents, are very much involved in the children's lives, and they have questions. In particular, the maternal grandparents have questions with Rachel about whether or not she should even be the children's mother. Is a stepmother a mother? Like, does it have the same power as a blood relative? Should they be with the blood relative as opposed to them? So it starts asking a lot of questions about what makes a family. And Rachel finds herself embroiled in a pretty kind of bitter fight with the grandparents about what's best for the children.
Thank you. You've linked into one of my first questions. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and then Carmel said that she's going to do a reading for us, which is very exciting. And then if you are currently watching this and you have any questions, pop them in the comments and we can answer those as we go along. So we're going to do a bit of a mixture of things this evening. But yeah, you said that just that visit and that asking the question of where she wants to move to sets up a whole complex web of everything. I don't know how you kept everything straight, having read the book. No spoilers, but I don't know how you kept everything straight.
It is a complex story, really. It is. There's a lot of layers to it, isn't there, Katrina? So yeah. There is. it might seem like a straightforward read at first, but there are so many different main characters in this with multiple points of view. So yeah, it is quite complex.
So you mentioned the theme of motherhood.
Yes.
I was wondering, as I was reading this, I was like, was there a reason you particularly chose to explore that theme of motherhood? Because that theme of motherhood works on so many different levels throughout the book.
It does. Well, there were a number of reasons actually, because one, starting off, I always kind of work with families. I like to look at family dynamics in every novel that I write. And so there's always a family at the heart of every story because I write family dramas. But when I started to write this one, I was thinking, okay, what kind of a family do I want to write about? And I decided I really wanted to look at blended families because they've just become part and parcel of everybody's social circles now, or if not within their own immediate family circles. And I think all of us, if we reach our hand out, we're going to touch a blended family very close to us. And within, like, I'm a stepmother, and within my immediate family, there are several step parents, half brothers and sisters. There's a lot of them within our family. So I kind of figured, like, I wanted to explore that because that's modern life, not just in Ireland, but worldwide. So I knew I was going to have a step parent at the center of this. And the other thing that I wanted to look at, I love looking at multi-generational stories, and I love the point of view of grandparents. And grandparents have always been a huge part of, in Irish culture, grandparents would play a very, very strong role in the upbringing of children, and they would have been very important to mine. And I know that that's mirrored in many cultures outside of Ireland too. So I really wanted to look at the grandparents in a leading light rather than just a supporting cast. I kind of wanted to, to kind of explore what that might be like. But I wanted to, in particular, show that grandparents are quite vibrant now. So the characters, my grandparents, they're not like, that traditional 80-year-old, knitting by the fire. So like Sheila, for example, and her husband, Adrian, one of the sets of grandparents, they are still running their own business, very, very active, healthy, fit. And then the paternal grandparents, they're retired because they did very well by selling their business. So they've had early retirement, but they play tennis every day and they're leading a very, very healthy and fit lifestyle. And so I really wanted to show that grandparents, the grandparents are not kind of doddery old people sitting, as I said, by the fire. They have a point of view and they have wisdom to share. And so that was kind of why I looked at motherhood, and it was kind of taking all of those elements and then seeing how they would fit. And then as a stepmother myself, it was really important to me that I would include step parents into the story. And so when I became a step parent, my stepdaughter was 3. She's just this little gorgeous bundle of pink, beautiful fun, and she was just fabulous. But right in the Disney princess era, when I met her, she was completely enthralled with Disney. And we started. So I would read her bedtime stories, and we'd watch the Disney movies, of course. But I bought all the Disney books, and I read them to her. But in every single book, of course, the baddie and the villain is always the step parent. So the evil stepmother queen. Each time the step parent was the reason that this beautiful princess was having such a terrible time. And it became a bit of a joke with my stepdaughter and I, that we'd look at this and, I kind of go, okay, I promised to only be a little bit evil, that I would try to be too evil. And we talked about this all the time. And it just, it irked a bit, but also you kind of go, ugh. And then kind of as I went on, then you kind of notice that, if something is kind of bugging you, you'll notice it all the time. Do you know that? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so even then, like when we'd watch the children's Christmas movies, and I don't know if have you seen Santa Claus, the movie? It's the one with Tim Allen. Like it's
yes, yeah.
Wonderful. We love those. That whole series was there 4 or 5 of them, whatever. But my kids love all of that, and my stepdaughter loved it too. But of course, the kind of the baddie in that is the idiot stepfather. Like he's this bumbling idiot, he's the butt of all the jokes. And again, it's the step parent, and it kind of becomes like it's just an easy out, I think, for Hollywood, and also in books, to actually make the step parent bad. So I thought I'd try and readdress the balance and have my stepmother that at the heart of this story. Like, there's no doubt from the very beginning, there's no evil undercurrent with her. She loves the children, and the children are her number one priority, putting herself last on multiple layers in order to give the children what they need. And that, I make no apology about that, because in my experience, step parents in the main choose to love and are decent people. So I wanted to kind of put that at the heart of the story. So that was kind of why the motherhood, and then it just kind of evolved from that. So you have your grandmothers, your mothers, you know, and then even the sisterhood, the sisterhood
Yeah.
of and Rachel. Yeah. So it's a big, meaty theme, really. When I started to look at it, I could have written probably 4 books on this subject. You know, I just did
Yeah.
one tiny slice of the pie, really.
It's the fact that the motherhood like seeps into so many different threads coming off of even each of those
Yeah.
mothers. It then seeps into, well,
Yeah.
you know, the children's mother, and
Yeah.
yeah, and like you say, the sister, which we're not going to, no
We
spoilers,
want-
but yeah.
And that's the thing, and that's the problem, because I'd love to say to you, maybe I'll say to you, but even when I was writing it, because each of the we've three. See, with blended families, and I know this from personal experience, like families get complicated and they get bigger, so you have
Hmm.
multiple sets of everything. So in my story, I have 3 sets of grandparents. So you have the step grandparents, you have the maternal grandparents, and you have the paternal grandparents. And there's like hierarchy there, because different people feel they have more rights to the children than others, for different reasons. And again, I've seen that myself personally, that grandparents can kind of put themselves at different levels, and not necessarily fairly, but they do. Um, but each of the grandmothers tells part of the story from their point of view, and so you're looking at them, of course, as mothers. So
Yeah.
Sheila is very much, she's the maternal grandmother, and she's thinking about her daughter died many, many years ago, but she's very much thinking about her daughter Neve. And then Belinda is the paternal grandmother, and she's grieving because her son died 2 years previously. So she's grieving the loss of her son. And then Annie is Rachel's mother, the step grandmother, and she's missing her daughter. So she sees her daughter. She's in New Zealand and she's watching her daughter in Ireland unhappy. And she's really kind of stuck. She can't help her. So yeah, there's lots of layers to this one.
Yeah. You've kind of touched on this, but we had a question that links nicely in with this. So Linda would like to know the inspiration behind it. Obviously, we've talked about, you know, the theme of motherhood in general, but what was the actual inspiration? What was the spark?
Well, I kind of always like, when I write books, I tend to write them in blocks of twos. Okay, so the last one, The Moon Over Kilmore Quay, and it really explores immigration, and it explores the pull between, it was New York and Ireland. And this story is completely different. I mean, like, they're miles apart, like they're not even remotely close. But what they do share is that thread of the pull of home and heart, and and 2 places. And Rachel has this, the same as the characters did in Moon Over Kilmore Quay. And she very much, she if it was just her, if it was just her, she would be in New Zealand. There would be no questions asked. But she's trying to do what's right for the children and what's right for the children's grandparents. So she's trying to kind of, you know, think about everybody else, and she's putting herself pretty much last. And I think as mothers do that a lot anyhow, that isn't unusual. So it was really nice to kind of tease out that pull again. So I deliberately kind of wanted to do that. So that was one of the inspirations for it. And then the other thing was, then definitely I wanted to have the voices of an older generation. So I had decided to have grandparents. That was actually one of the first things I decided to do. I knew that the family drama would have grandparents, but I wasn't quite sure where they would be or what would happen. Then I decided blended families, and I don't know how it even came to me, but it was when I was thinking about blended families, and I just thought, God, imagine now if everybody was gone except for a step parent and grandparents. And I got like legal advice. I had to get like legal advice. And I've been
Of
told,
course.
yeah, I've written this is not actually happened. There hasn't been a case like this. There's been cases of grandparents versus their children, you know, for custody or whatever, but not a step parent versus grandparents on their own. So there you go. That was quite interesting.
No, yeah, definitely. You also touched on the setting. We talked a little bit about this, the setting of Moon Over Kilmore Quay, and then this time again, you brought us two fabulous and very different settings. Why did you choose to go with Ireland and New Zealand specifically?
Oh yeah, well, you know, I'm Irish and I live in Ireland, so I kind of do like to have part of my novels set in Ireland, and I will always pick somewhere in Ireland to set them. And in this particular one, it's set partly in across kind of Dublin Bay. So Dublin is the capital of Ireland, for anyone who doesn't know, and it's on the coast. I spent a lot, I'm in Wexford now, which is down the southeast, but I spent many years living in Dublin and working in Dublin. I worked for Aer Lingus, the national airline, and I always lived North County Dublin, on the coast along Dublin Bay. And Malahide, where this is set, the village that it's set in, I lived there for many years. I haven't lived there for a long time, but I have a lot of happy memories and a lot of the places that Rachel talks about in the novel. So it was really nice to kind of set the characters there. And it's also really, really beautiful. And I wanted somewhere to kind of rival the beauty of New Zealand, because New Zealand is stunning. And I needed there to be, there to be some equality there. Do you know what I mean? So I wanted her to live, because there are some parts of Dublin that might not be as pretty. Do you know what I mean? That would be a little bit more urban. So I wanted it to be a coastal village. The New Zealand one actually was kind of because of my godparents. My aunt and uncle, who were my godparents, emigrated to Hawke's Bay, where this book is set, when I was quite young. And we're very close. We're super close. We talk a couple of times a week, always have done. And they are, some godparents aren't great. Mine are amazing. They've always been like this huge part of my life. And they used to send home photographs and postcards to me all the time. And it became kind of, Hawke's Bay to me was just the most exotic, amazing, beautiful place. And I really just fell in love with it. So when I decided to write the story that it was going to be a stepmother versus grandparents and this pull of location, it had to be far away. It was not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
If I said it like, if they were from London, it had to be that if she was going to move us to the other side of the world. So that's why I chose, and it was going to be Australia at one point. It was going to be Perth in Western Australia. And then I was kind of looking at Hawke's Bay, because as I said, for that connection. Yeah. And I found this town called Napier that was, there was a volcano eruption in the 1920s and the whole town was wiped out. So they rebuilt it in the 1920s. But when they had to rebuild it from scratch, they made a decision and said, okay, let's build, everything has to be in 1920s Art Deco decor. So the rule was made. So every building in Napier is built like that. And I thought, well, that's just something about that tickled my fancy. So I thought, well, Napier and Hawke's Bay is where it's set for those reasons.
That sounds like a really interesting, it would be an interesting place to see.
Yeah. It's really stunning, beautiful. If you look at it, if anyone's watching and they get a chance, just Google Napier, Napier in Hawke's Bay, and you'll see it. What I mean, all of the buildings have that gorgeous Art Deco style and very beautiful. It's used actually a lot for movies. They would often use it as a film set because it looks like it's stuck in the 1920s still.
Yeah, it's ready built for you.
Yeah. Okay, anyone calling? It's fine.
So would you like to take this opportunity to do a little reading for us?
Yeah, I'd love to.
We'll carry on with some more questions after that.
Yeah, that would be great.
Thank you.
What I thought I'd do is, because, I wanted to make sure that I don't choose anything that might possibly have a spoiler.
Yeah, no spoilers.
Yeah, because it is kind of, as we've said, like there's quite a few threads in this. And I just don't want to give anything away, so it's probably better that I do something from the first chapter. So the first chapter begins actually. Rachel has gone on a much awaited and desired holiday vacation to New Zealand. So she's in Hawke's Bay with her two children. As I said, Olivia and Dylan are 8 and 5, and in this particular scene, she is climbing Tomato Peak, which is this beautiful peak. Which offers like 360-degree panoramic views all around Hawke's Bay. And she's climbed it with her dad, Joe, Grandpa Joe, and her sister, Claudia. And while they've just reached the top of the peak, and she's remembering how she met Lorcan, who is her husband that died a few years previously. And she met him 12 years previously in New Zealand, and she's remembering that. And then it goes back then to the now. So I'm going to read you that bit. So, leaving the children to question their grandpa further about giants and warring tribes, Rachel took a moment to take in the beautiful view from the mountaintop. once again allowing her mind to wander. 12 years ago, she had stood on this exact spot with Lorcan himself. At 18 years old, she'd known nothing about love or the world. Yes, she'd dated boys from home, but she'd always felt that there was something missing from those relationships. She wasn't sure what, until an Irish tourist had walked into the Italian deli where she worked part-time. A blackboard wall had displayed the brunch and lunch menu with details of the daily specials. And to this day, when Rachel smelt good coffee, it took her back to that first job and the summer when she fell head over heels in love. Rachel had noticed Lorcan as soon as he joined the queue for coffee. He had a presence, a self-assurance that made him stand out from any crowd. And as she took orders from the customers in front of him, she felt his eyes on her in return. When he finally reached the counter and placed his order, his soft Irish lilt made her insides melt. He was tall and lean, his hair cropped short. This was a stark contrast to the boys in Rachel's circle, who were more grungy than this clean-cut stranger. She took her time grinding the beans and heating the milk. When she handed him his drink, it was clear he wasn't in any rush to move on either. Their eyes lingered on each other until her supervisor reprimanded her for letting the queue build up. As she watched him walk out the door, she felt her heart sink in disappointment. Despite only spending mere moments in his company, Rachel had felt an instant connection, a knowing. And for the rest of her shift, she wished she was the type of girl who was brave enough to ask a man for his phone number. But thankfully for Rachel, Lorcan was braver than she was. When she left the deli, she found him sitting on the wall outside, reading a book. "What are you doing here?" Rachel asked, reaching up to pull her hair out of his ponytail. She felt a shiver of excitement that her mystery stranger had not walked out of her life after all. He took a moment to answer, closing his book and placing it into the small backpack that lay at his feet. Then he looked at her, and Rachel found herself walking towards him. "I'm waiting for you to ask if you would like to go out with me." He spoke slowly, with intent. "Yes." Rachel didn't even hesitate before she answered. She felt only a need to start whatever this was. The Irishman smiled at her, and that was it for Rachel. Whatever he wanted, she would give him. And so a plan was made to spend the following day together on Rachel's day off. She would show him the local sights, starting with a trek up to this very spot on Tomato Peak. Now, as she stood there again 12 years later, Rachel looked around her and whispered to a ghost, "I wish you were here, Lurk." Claudia walked back over to stand next to her, linking arms with her and bringing her back to the present. "You okay, sis? You look very serious." "Yeah, nah, I was miles away. I brought Lorcan up here on our first date, and pretty much in this exact spot. He kissed me for the first time." "From my memory of that summer, you two never stopped kissing." Claudia made a face, clearly trying to keep the mood light. Rachel smiled in recognition. Their summer romance was intense. Their attraction to each other was instant and only grew the more time they spent together. "I remember tagging along with you both a few times on your dates, and I know it drove you mad, but Lorcan was nice to me. He never made me feel like a third wheel," Claudia said. "He was a good man. He liked you back then, thought your sass was funny. Standing here without him, it's hard to believe that he'll never see this view again. It's..." Rachel trailed off, unable to finish the thought. I won't say, "That's what it is," little tiny curse with it. "But if I'm allowed to be selfish for a minute, despite everything, I'm glad you're here now." "Me too, sis. When we went on our European travels, I never guessed that I'd end up living in Ireland permanently. You never know where life is going to take you, I suppose." Rachel looked down at the Chakuti River, twisting and turning below them. "Mom, I'm hungry," Dylan shouted suddenly. Instinctively, Rachel moved to walk towards the children, pulling juice and crackers from her backpack. Claudia put a hand out to stop her. "We need you too, you know, Mum and Dad, me." Rachel spun around, confused by the change in conversation. "And I think you might need us," Claudia finished. "Is there something I'm missing? Are you all okay?" "Relax. Everyone is hale and hearty. I'm just saying that we miss you, sis. And now that Lorcan is gone, well, I've been thinking, why can't you and the kids move back home? You could come to live in Hawke's Bay with us all." Rachel laughed at the absurdity of Claudia's words. "Don't be ridiculous. My home is in Ireland now, with the children as well, you know." "Why does it have to be? What's keeping you there? Your business is online. You could run Ray's Closet from here. New Zealand is neat clothes too." Rachel shook her head. trying to shake off the ridiculous proposition her sister was making, as if she could ever move back home. That was an impossible dream, wasn't it?
Oh, that it was so lovely hearing the beginning parts again, having read and got to the end, and then to kind of like revisit and be like, oh yeah, revisit Rachel at the beginning of her journey through the book. Thank you so much for reading that. It was lovely to hear.
It was lovely actually to write the scenes with Rachel and Lorcan, because I always knew Lorcan was dead. Like, that was the whole point, like, that he was dead.
Yeah.
But he's a character. He's very much part of the story, because
Yes.
there are a lot of flashbacks like that scene there.
Yeah.
You get to see this great love story between Rachel and Lorcan in moments like that. And they had this gorgeous love story. It's, it was quite beautiful actually to write. And I loved that scene actually. It was quite nice when he walked into the deli. I could really picture that happening.
Yeah. The bit where you sort of said, oh, every time she smelled the coffee, she was reminded of it. Like,
it's true.
I can feel that there, definitely. Yeah. I did listen to this one on audio, and I can say it was very well narrated. And so hearing you read it again, I was like, oh, taken back to my audiobook. The book is, of course, linked in the description box, both versions.
Aoife McMahon, who does the audio, I mean, I couldn't get over when they sent me, because they send me over some samples of different of different narrators, and Aoife has done a couple of my books and she's always excellent. But this one was kind of complicated because I didn't dare to do the accents. But you have the New Zealand accents, you have the Irish, the Dublin accents, and then the Lorcan is actually from Belfast, and so his parents, the grandparents, that play a big role in it, Oscar and Belinda, are from Belfast. So she has 3 very different sets of accents. She really nailed it, didn't she? She does a great job.
She really did. I commented, was listening at the time, and I was sat next to my husband, and I commented, I said, this narrator's doing such a great job of switching between this New Zealand accent and this Irish accent, and then, as you say, then you've got your Belfast accent as well. Whoa, yeah.
Even, because what I noticed as well, being Irish, but like for the kids, right? So the kids, their dad was from Belfast, their mum was from New Zealand, or their stepmom was from New Zealand, but they're living in Dublin, and she did a twang to their voices that kind of had a little bit of
like that inflection of going up at the end a little bit.
I noticed that, and I thought her level of detail, she really thought about these kids. Kids do sound a bit like you, don't they? They pick up your accent. So
amazing. Exactly. No, she did a really, really good job. I highly recommend the audiobook. But then, if you get the physical book, you get those beautiful covers.
You do.
They are fabulous covers. Speaking of the different covers, you mentioned at the beginning that you had your US and Canada cover and then your UK Ireland cover. Because you have your novels published in so many different markets now, and I know you lived in, as you say, different parts of Ireland, and you've lived in England. When you write, is there a specific reader or market that you have in mind when you write, knowing that your books are going to be published all over the place?
No, not really. I definitely write with my readers in mind, but I feel my readers are, from the interactions I have, I feel my readers are mostly women, although I do have male readers, but they're mostly women, and they are kind of anything from 20 to 90, like, you know what I mean? So I just write, and I feel like, so I keep them in mind, and I go, okay, if they're there from the beginning, they know that in a Carmel Harrington read, they want an escapist read, and they want an emotional journey, like they do want that emotional arc, and to actually be brought to kind of a satisfying conclusion, even if it's not the happy ever after that you'd want, a happy, an ending that is satisfying. So I have that in mind every time I write a story, but I never think about, what I don't do is I don't look at genres that are popular. I don't kind of say, oh, look, I'm going to write this because at the minute everyone is writing. I don't do that. I kind of do my own thing. And I feel like that, maybe one of these days, whatever I do, and it will just be the next big thing. And all of a sudden, things might go stratospheric, which would be nice. But I just kind of, I write books that I think my readers are going to enjoy. When it comes to locations, I do enjoy having an international sweep, because I think as well, I like books. I read books myself. I love, Katrina, to read books that actually bring me out of my armchair to wherever, and so that I learn something new about these places. And it actually gives me, like, I keep a notebook and I write down, I really want to go to this place, and I'll Google it and look it up and add it to my list of places to visit. And I kind of love that. And I've had lots of times readers will contact me and say, guess where I am? And they'll, take a photograph, because like a lot of people came to Kilmore Quay who'd read Kilmore Quay, and I thought that was really nice. The amount of readers who sent me messages saying, look where I am, and they were kind of walking in Bee's footsteps, which was lovely. So
it's still on my list. It's still on my agenda.
When you do, I told you that I said this to you last year. I can remember saying this to you when we chatted. When you do come, you have to tell me, and if you don't mind, I will buy you your fish and chips in together, because it is so lovely there, and I would love to do that with you. I think it would be a really fun thing to do.
I'm a lot closer to it actually happening now. I was a lot further away last time, so I'm much closer to it now.
It's fabulous. It is fabulous. So I don't, in answer to that question, I don't kind of target a specific reader or market, but readers are my first priority. And I feel like that most readers that read me, they kind of expect a certain parameter in my books. I do try to, but like every book is very different to the last. They're never going to read the same thing twice. They're all very unique, original stories, but they will have a good, strong emotional heart to them. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. Do you find the fact that you've got these readers that, as you say, they have a certain level of expectation? Do you ever find that sort of confining when you write?
No, not really. No, because I think that I'm writing the books. I think they say, like, it's a very true saying. I often say this, if a reader, or sorry, if an aspiring writer comes to me and says, give me some advice, I always say to them, like, write the book that you want to read. And so I'm writing the books that I want to read. So I love reading nuanced, emotional reads with families at their heart, that are transportive, that bring you outside of as I said, you're out in different locations. But also, there's fairly serious themes in all of my books. Every book that I've written will have a very strong theme to it, and I'm not afraid of getting kind of down and dirty and throwing some serious issues at my characters, because I really do believe that we as readers, we're emotionally intelligent, and we can take that on, and we can take on these complex storylines. And so I'm kind of interested, like, I mean, I do, it's not like I don't write twists, like, the way sometimes authors, and they say, like, this huge twist in your book. I like to say I have reveals. So what I do is, so I do like to surprise readers, and I love it when a reader goes, oh, I had no clue you were going to do that. And I love doing that with readers, and to keep a few little reveals up my sleeve. And I will always do that, because I think that's what keeps you turning the pages, when you kind of are surprised as you read them. But I don't know, I never feel confined. I suppose, like, my second book, the second book I wrote, I was actually on maternity leave with my son, and sure, it was a hormonal mess, definitely. But I had a serial killer, and what I did was, I always knew there was going to be a murder in that book, like, but I actually gave the point of view of the serial killer when I was writing it. So I did alternative chapters, and my editor was like, no, Carmel, like, you can't go from like a family drama to like having a serial killer's point of view, because it was so dark. I mean, my husband always jokes and says, one of these days I'm going to release to the internet those chapters that were taken out of the book, because seriously, Mal, the serial killer, he was really dark, but I think it's because I was so hormonal. But but I think probably that would be, if I wanted to do something like that dark, if I wanted to do crime or a thriller, I would probably do it under a pseudonym. Carmel Harrington, for these family dramas, But I would like to keep pushing the boundaries of family dramas, because literally, I don't want to stay safe, you know what I mean? So next year's book, I've kind of changed it up a little bit again, you know what I mean? And I'm kind of, every book I try to kind of make it very different to the last, and I'll keep doing that.
Yeah. We have had a question coming in about next year's book, but I'm going to save that for a little bit down the line, because I want to ask if it links into something I saw on your Instagram as well. Yeah, I know. You mentioned, obviously, second book and linking to last year's books. I was wondering, obviously, you've got quite a few publication days under your belt now, and you'll often have a different Irish publication day to a UK publication day to a US publication day. you obviously have a New Zealand one for this coming out. Does it make you more or less nervous having done it so many times now?
It's the same amount of nerves. Honestly, it doesn't change.
Yeah.
Each book is very different, and you'll have a different kind of set of nerves. There might be, but there's still nerves. You know what I mean? And I would never take anything for granted. Like you see your goalposts change as well, Katrina, because you start off like, and you kind of go like your first book, you just want it to be published, and you just want maybe one reader to say that they liked it,
Yeah.
and you're happy. You get 10 reviews that are kind of positive, and you're like, woohoo, I've done it. But then your second book, like that's no longer the goal. Now the goal is like you have
Mm.
to get 20 reviews or whatever. So I feel that the goalposts are always changing for me. This year I felt nerves for different reasons. This was my 10th book in my 10th year as a published author, and that felt like a milestone. But it was one that I said to my agent in January when we had our kind of catch up after Christmas, and I said to her, I want this year to be one about celebration. I really want it to be celebrating the fact that 10 years later I'm still here as a published author, earning a living from doing something I love. And I think that's worth celebrating, and that I've done a book a year, and I've managed to do that. Like next year's is written, you know what I mean? So I kind of feel I really wanted to acknowledge that with myself, and to celebrate that. And it it's not nothing. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
something, and I wanted to kind of because I think sometimes you get so caught up in this, like the business side of it is full on. Like there's a lot of
Mm.
work being an author, apart from the creative writing side.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other work. So the nerves never go away. And yeah, I think they're always there. I had hoped this year, was really hoping to kind of get to number one here in Ireland, in the Irish bestsellers charts, but I got to number two, and I've stayed in the top five since it came out. So
That's awesome.
yeah, I've been hovering around two, three. I think I'm four this week. So I'm kind of like, it's staying. So I'm delighted. Like it's selling extremely well, and it's doing really well. So then next year, now I'll hope for number one for next year, for next year's one instead. You know what I mean? So there's always a goal. There's always a new goal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, considering the fact that you're celebrating 10 books in 10 years, thank you for fitting us in on your grand tour.
Always, like literally, that always will do. You can just guarantee that I will never say no to you.
Awesome. It's always lovely having you on to chat anyway.
Yeah.
If anybody watching wants to get any last minute questions in, do leave comments. I have another burning question, and then we're going to link into what next year's book, what we can expect from next year's book as well. I asked you this question last time, but obviously it's a different book this time. So, was there any part of this book that was harder to write than others, and why?
Yeah. I think that I found some of the scenes with the children,
Yeah,
I found them difficult. And I found, yeah, they were the difficult ones to write. And you can't help but put yourself, because the kids in this, they're younger than my kids, but they are kind of versions of my kids when they were that age. And that same dynamic, you know what I mean? That,
yeah,
the bossy older sister, and the kind of, and that's very similar to my two. And they would kind of, so I used a lot of kind of Amelia and Nate with Olivia and Dylan, and so there were times there for some of the scenes. There's a scene, and this isn't a spoiler because we all know who's dead, but there's a scene at Christmas towards the end of the book, actually. And I promise you, this is not going to spoil the book for you at all, for anyone who hasn't read it. But it's a gorgeous scene. But it's Rachel goes to see the kids in their nativity play in school, and then she brings them to see Santa, and they've had a lovely kind of Christmassy day together, and then they're coming home, and the kids are missing their dad. Really, they're missing that. They don't remember their mum, so it's not any
mm,
disrespect, but they just don't remember her because she died when they were very young. But they're missing their dad because they do remember their dad. And there's a gorgeous scene, and I won't say any more about the scene because I don't want to kind of ruin the scene, but there's a lovely scene where Rachel has to kind of talk to them a bit about people who've died before us, and the fact that they never really go away and where they are. And she explains it in a beautiful way. And I found that really, really emotional and hard to write, because I couldn't help but kind of go there, like, well, what would happen if something happened to me? And it was just really, really hard. So I found
mm,
that was probably the hardest to write. But other than that, like, I mean, this book actually was really, I loved writing it. The other bits that were hard were around, I mentioned, around the kind of, around the legal stuff, because there is a
mm-hmm,
legal there are some legal elements to the story, and again, I won't say any more, but there are some legal. So I had to kind of speak to a barrister and get some advice, and I was kind of aware of the responsibility of that, because what I didn't want, if somebody was reading this who had been through a similar experience to Rachel, I didn't want them to kind of feel like I had done, while it is fiction, of course it's fiction, but serious, I take my research seriously. So I feel I've done a fairly decent job with that, and I did get a sign off like that I was kind of fairly accurate with it. But that side of it was a little bit tricky, because I had to read, I read, I'm telling you, stacks of transcripts of battles to kind of get it right in your head.
That's a whole different research behind a book. Never mind just going on a trip to a location. You read tracks of legal transcripts.
Yeah, literally, that was a lot of that.
Yeah, I do remember the nativity play, like you say, they had a lovely Christmassy day, because I think whenever there's a moment like that gets a bit emotional, especially when it's linked to then like sort of something that they've done. I think the teacher in me gets emotional, and like that like protective side. It was emotional to read as well. I can guarantee that.
Thank you. I'm glad, because it's nice, because you don't know, because there are certain scenes when I write them I find more emotional than others, and you kind of wonder, will that kind of transcend. I feel what I'm told, people, they will come and they'll tell you about certain scenes that get them. And a lot of people have told me that they've found that scene actually very emotional, and I've had a lot of feedback about a couple of scenes that they found very emotional. But usually the ones that I've kind of cried as I've written them are the ones that kind of people also, that's my barometer. If I'm crying as I write it, I'm going, oh good, this is going to really get the readers, this is going to really get to them, because it is sad, and life can be sad sometimes, can't it? Like, unfortunately, there are moments in life that are difficult for us all. Like, we all have to deal with loss and bereavement, and it's just part of that whole myriad of living. Like, you can't live without dealing with loss and without grieving. In order, when you love, there is also going to be the flip side of that, unfortunately, and that is explored. There's that very in this.
Yeah, and even though you do deal with grief and loss and what have you, I can guarantee it's still very uplifting and very kind of powerful in both ways, both sort of emotional, not negative, but the sort of sadder emotional side of things, but also the happier emotional side of things. It is a very uplifting novel, just like the last one that we talked about as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. I didn't want to write a book that was kind of at the graveyard, so that's why I deliberately set it. It's 2 years after the dad has died, so of course, you never, like, anyone who's lost a parent, you don't forget about it like that. You're gonna be hit by that maybe 20 years later, but like that whole, the big grief is kind of gone. You've gone through the worst of it. You've done the first of everything. So I deliberately said, initially it was going to be 1 year on, and I felt, no, it's too raw. 1 year on, you're still having, this is the first Christmas, this is the first. So 2 years on, a lot of that hard work has been done. I wanted to, for the reader, I didn't want the reader to be really too crying too much too soon. This is a lot of fun.
Question that sort of links in with the characters here. Do you miss your characters when you finish a book? And are you ever tempted to write a sequel?
Yeah, always. I'm always tempted to write a sequel, and I keep, like, in every book that I've written, there will be a character that I could do a sequel. Like, not necessarily all of them, but they might get a mention, really. But there's definitely a character that I feel I could kind of move on and do something else with them. I think, though, for this one in particular, because Rachel she's still quite young. Like, she's in her late 20s. And I kind of wouldn't mind checking in on her again at some point. I think it will be quite nice to see how she's doing. And there's something that happens in the book, which I can't say what, but there is something that happens, and I think it would be kind of interesting to check back and see whether or not that can bite anyone.
Yes, I would definitely like to read that. I also want to hear more about Claudia as well.
Yeah, I see. I think that would be really interesting to. Yeah, there's definitely a sequel there. At some point there would be a sequel there, and but I think it's the same for at the minute. Each time it's a new book and it's an original book, and you kind of, it's hard to know, isn't it? I haven't done any sequels at all, but I've talked about doing sequels for them all. And at some point, I used to say for the first one, Beyond Grace's Rainbow, that I'd do a sequel after 10 years. Well, the 10 years has just happened.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, because if you're revisiting Rachel, revisiting Claudia, you do like to write from multiple points of view.
Yeah.
They're ready made.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, exactly. Well, it would be so much easier for me if I did a sequel, because you're picking up location is done.
Hmm.
Your characters are done, like obviously new storylines, but you kind of know the characters, and like
Yeah.
it's all there. I think it would even, Jack, maybe more with Jack as well. I really liked writing. I gave Jack is Rachel's brother-in-law,
Hmm.
and he's partially deaf. And there's one scene written in his point of view, and he's throughout the whole novel, he's featured in it, but I
Yeah.
don't write his point of view except for one scene, which was quite a powerful scene, actually, I gave him.
Yeah, and
And
the fact that you get his point of view just at that moment is powerful in itself as well.
it is, yeah, it was an important, it felt like it should be his, because I
Yeah.
could have given that to anyone.
Yeah.
I did kind of wonder about giving it to Rachel, that she, and you'll know, sorry now, people who haven't read it, and you'll kind of get to it when you get to the Jack point of view chapter, you'll know what I'm talking about. But I was going to, that was initially going to be Rachel's. I thought, no, it has to be Jack's. I wanted it to be
Mm.
his. But I really, I feel like I've lost that. There's so many layers to him as well. I could peel back. I think he would be really
Yeah.
interesting to look at as well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, there's definitely scope there for sequel, but whether,
And if your publishers are listening, there's demand for it as well.
okay.
Yeah, literally demand for it. Okay. We are reaching the end of our hour. So we have this question here, which links in with something I wanted to ask as well. So Linda says, I know that this book has just been released, but is there something else in the pipeline? You've told us that you've already written next year's book. And I see that you have just come back from Easter, came back
Yep.
from a trip to New York and a cruise. Is any of that linked with next year's book? What's in the pipeline? What can we expect? What's coming up?
It is, and it is. You're quite right. It is. I do, if I can, I like to visit the places that I'm writing about. If the location is important, if it's not important, it doesn't matter. But if I can, and the location in this book that I've just written is very important. The book is partially set in Donegal in Ireland, which is the north of Ireland, and it's partially set in Bermuda, which is a tropical island, kind of in between America and Europe, and it's partially set there, and it's a dual timeline, but a good 60% of it is set in 1939. So it's my
Oh,
first time going back in time. So again, it's why I said to you, I like to kind of push. So it's a dual timeline, and it's set between the two locations, but predominantly in Bermuda. And because it was partially set in 1939 Bermuda, and it's also set in the now Bermuda, I kind of needed to visit there because I had to go visit a historian, and I had to go
oh,
do a bit of work to make sure that I was authentically writing about the place, because I wasn't quite sure, because it's a very different place to Ireland. You know what I mean? So I couldn't just
yeah.
kind of say what was Ireland like in 1939. So I had to do a bit of research, and I did. So while we had the most amazing, we took a cruise because we were doing it over Easter, and the kids were coming with us. And I was looking at, like, do you know what, flights to Bermuda are crazy. Like, I mean, it's a really expensive place to get to.
Mm.
And it was just too much for the family to do. And it was like Big Brother is watching you, right? And because I had been looking at flights, Google just threw up this ad for a cruise to Bermuda. And it was like, literally, they were giving it away because nobody was really cruising at Easter still because of COVID reasons.
Mm.
So we got a really, really good deal. So the four of us went and had the time of our lives. I mean, it was spectacular. But they were 4 days, and the cruise, the reason it worked really well was it was docked for 4 days in Bermuda. It was just, Bermuda was the sole destination.
Yeah.
So I had 4 days on the island, and we did everything. It was amazing. Like, literally, from like the characters snorkel, we snorkeled. Wherever the characters went, like, and it was very much walking in the footsteps. There's a church in the story, so I went to the church and spoke to the priest there. What was it like in 1930? And like, it was, I did a lot of research. I took it seriously, but it was great fun. So the story is It's actually a sweeping love story. I wanted to write the most epic romance that I could think of. Because most of my books will have love in them, but it's family love, and it can
Yeah.
sometimes be romantic love, but not necessarily romantic love. But I wanted to write an unashamedly epic romantic drama, and this is a lot of drama in it, a lot of missteps, a lot of drama, but I hope it makes people. Hope it makes your heart swell. I really do, because it is it is really, really lovely, and there are three leading ladies in this story,
Mhm.
and there's a love triangle, and yeah, it is. I think I'm really proud of it. It's sort of, and I don't know. I still don't know how much to say. I don't know what to say much. I don't want to give too much away yet. But let me just tell you, it is a love story, and I think I think your hearts will be broken and then made up again by the end of it beautifully. It's a really lovely love story. Really nice.
I'm very excited. I thought that The Moon Over Kilmakee was a fairly epic love story. So if it's more than that,
It is more. Even more.
I'm,
It's
I'm
extra. It is extra. If Moon Over Kilmore is romantic, this is extra. This is definitely extra. Yeah.
nice, and I'm excited because I don't think I've read a book with that location before.
Well, I couldn't find. I mean, I did look, because when I was doing research, I bought some. It was nice that I was able to go, but I like to write my book first before I do the research, because I don't want to get clouded by anyone else's words.
Yeah,
So I like to write it, and when I've written it, then I'm not. It's just too. I don't want to. If you've written a book about Bermuda, I'd be afraid that I'd be using your terms. You know
yeah,
what I mean? So I write it, then I read the research. So I did buy quite a few books about the Royal Navy, because that's in this book. And I bought lots of books set in World War II, because it is partially set, but it's set really in like 2 months in 1939. So it's not a World War II. The world is on the brink of World War II, so it's just before World War II happens. But yeah, it was really, really cool, and I loved writing it. I love this book so much. I can't wait for everyone to read it, and I hope it is a slight change for me, because it's 1939. But yeah, it's got everything you would expect in a Carmel Harrington novel. Like, there's a lot of twists and turns in it, and surprises. I think it's going to make people go, oh, I hope.
again, your books do that to me, so I can't imagine this one not doing that to me.
Yeah, we'll get to it
And
as soon as it's ready.
yeah, you've clearly pitched it very well. Sounds amazing.
Oh, Linda.
Yeah. So yeah, we seem to have reached a point. We know what's coming up. Will that be a May release?
Yeah,
Probably.
I'm usually, what I am is, right at the kind of usually it'll be early May, kind of to end of May, in around that time frame.
Yeah.
But I don't know for definite, but it'll be in
Yeah.
around that, so that people have it ready for their summer holidays, really, I suppose.
Yeah.
And then always in England, that it's always the mass paperback is the first publication, so that will be 8 months later, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Which is why, so this year I had Moon Over Kilmore in England in Feb, and then A Mother's Heart in Ireland, in the bigger version.
Yeah, but the audio comes out the same time as the
Audio
island.
yeah, and you can, like, I mean, you can buy like Waterstones and the likes of that.
Yeah.
So you can buy the bigger version, but the smaller version, like this version, that's it. If you see the difference in the size,
Yeah.
that comes out. I can't get the camera. Yeah, that comes out 8 months later. It's just the way the formats, they're all different timings, really, so.
Yeah, but yeah, ebook and audio both come out at the same time
Yeah.
earlier though, so you can still read it.
Yeah, it's available everywhere, and yeah, you can get it. I mean, you should look at, the world is a village. It doesn't matter where you are. If you want it, you can get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I managed to borrow it from my US library still, because I still have their audiobooks. So yeah.
That's handy. That's
Yeah.
kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I've got all sorts of ways of getting my hands on audiobooks all over the place.
Yeah, I love audiobooks too. I
Yeah.
literally listen to them on, I'm constantly listening to audiobooks. And I listen to them with the kids as well. Like, we do a lot of audiobooks in the car for journeys as well. It's great
Yeah.
to pass time.
It absolutely is. I like listening with someone else in the car. That's always quite fun.
Isn't it? Like, it is
Yeah.
really, yeah. We're just starting the Rooftoppers, actually.
Oh, nice.
Blundell. That's what we've just started with the kids. So.
Wicked. Okay. Well, as I said, all links to the book and links to our previous interview are in the description box below. So if you missed that one, that was a lot of fun. And we talked quite a lot about the moon over Kilmackey as well as A Mother's Heart today. So if you are interested in that one, go and watch our interview from last year. And yeah, as I say, everything is linked down below. Thank you so much for your questions, and thank you so much for you coming back. It's amazing. We just have to make this an annual thing now. It's great. And
So. Yeah, I think we
yeah,
have to. It'd be rude
yeah,
not to, really, wouldn't it? Yeah.
exactly. I mean, we started a tradition, so we can't really deviate from it now.
We'll talk 1939, Sharon, but you will after. Let's just see now. This is the deal. So when we talk next, right? Well, we'll talk on social media, but when we do the next interview, I need to know, did your heart swell like I told you it was going to swell?
Yeah,
And if
yeah.
you better lie, if not, basically.
I'll have to like put a little clip of what you just said
Yeah.
into the interview and be like, well, you said,
Yeah.
let's see if it actually happened.
Yeah. You go, woo! Yeah.
Yeah, did I go?
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you for watching.
Thanks, Linda. Thank you. Hi,
Yeah.
Linda.
But yeah, and thank you to everybody else who's watched live just now, and thank you to everybody else who has watched after the event. And yeah, make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss next year's interview with Carmel,
Yeah.
where we talk epic love stories and whether I did actually go at the next book. I can't wait to read it now. I can't believe I've got to wait a year to read it. Yeah, it's a bit.
I literally, I think that there are several leading men, and they're all pretty good. I think
Yeah,
it's going to be interesting to see what you think, but I think you're going to enjoy this one. I think
yeah.
so. I
I'm
enjoyed it.
excited. Yeah. Yeah, very, very excited. So yeah, as I say, thank you so much for coming by again. I will be back with another video soon. Carmel will be back with more books very soon as well. And yeah, and again, congratulations on 10 years, 10 books in 10 years. Like that is a lot.
Yeah, it is. It's good. It's good. I'm
Yeah,
pleased. I'm really pleased, and I love. She look at it. It's hard work. I'm not saying it's not, but I love what I do, and I feel a lot of gratitude. Do you know what I mean? I do feel a lot of gratitude this year. That's what
yeah,
this year is about. I
yeah,
feel very grateful to my readers and for you and for people like you that support books and champion books. And, it makes my job a lot easier because there's someone like you that kind of puts books in the arms of readers. It's amazing.
yeah.
So a lot of gratitude.
Oh, fabulous. Well, yeah, I will say goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Yeah, and thanks for watching.